Give us your sense of what's dictating movement at the NSE at the moment and what this in turn spells for the performance of the NSE for the remainder of the year.
Well, thank you very much, Alishia, and I'm glad to be here. Well, basically, as you've just analyzed a moment ago, which was very, very impressive, we are seeing the market at the moment seeing a bit of little activity from the foreign participants of the market, and a lot of retail activity, mostly a lot of selling off because of the holiday spending, which most of the retailers are preparing for, especially over the next few weeks. Though we're also seeing a bit of speculative activity on some counters like Sasini, which has started, we're seeing a bit of demand, mainly because of the corporate actions. But some of the other counters which had been basically speculative, like Kabasid, Kenya Power, you're seeing them losing off in terms of the steam of the demand. But some of the blue chips like East African breweries, as you observed, and BAT, we are seeing most of the investors are taking positions now because of their end of year or interim payouts.
Let's take a look at Sasini's numbers. I mean, you mentioned corporate action. We saw the companies out with numbers this morning and really posting a profit after tax arising from operating activities of 137.2 million shillings compared to a loss recorded in the previous year. Market reaction to those numbers?
Well, market reaction has been fairly indifferent, mainly because most of the investors in our market are developed cold feet towards agricultural stocks, mainly because of, one, their dependence on the weather patterns, which basically have been unpredictable over the last few years. As you observed, last financial year they reported a loss, and seeing them reporting a profit this year is still more of a concern because of the trend, because of basically we are not certain whether that's going to be sustained. And so for such a counter, we are seeing, especially in terms of the PE, price to earnings, it's fairly undervalued, yet the demand for the share is not as strong. But basically in terms of how they are approaching that, we are seeing them diversifying in terms of opening retail outlets to be able to at least stop depending too much on the weather patterns. Though the other concern for them would be forex risks, which basically is another issue that they have observed about issues to do with the strengthening of the shilling, which basically is another concern for such counters because maybe they might have to consider hedging.
We're considering tea players at a time where tea prices have really been beneficial on account of the drought, surprisingly enough, simply because production has been curbed at a time when demand still remains high. Do you see tea prices maintaining their upward momentum that we've witnessed over the past couple of months?
Well, the demand, especially in terms of the Asian market, has been very, very stable and almost like growing. Also looking at some of these other markets like Pakistan, which definitely have also been picking a lot of our tea. But the demand definitely is not really guaranteed because we still have other competing markets, which basically are definitely going to start also edging in terms of demanding a piece of the pie.
Just taking a look at this company, we're speaking to the company's MD a little later on today in Power Lunch. Any market questions that are still out there pertaining to Sasini Tea specifically?
Well, one of the concerns, especially in terms of that share, is basically the issue of the liquidity. There are some times when you have a lot of demand of the share but lack to find enough supply, so they might be considering either doing another share split or a bonus issue so that you can be able to have more availability of the share. The other concern basically would be issues to do with how they are diversifying in terms of cushioning themselves, because some of these agricultural stocks, a lot of the Kenyan investors tend to shun away from them, mainly because of their too much dependence on the weather or how they can be able to see how they can be able to still produce through either irrigation or modern methods of performance, so that they can be able to still sustain in terms of performance. And also some of looking out in terms of how they can be able to still tap into some of the local markets. Their dependence a lot again on export market might again keep on being eaten by the forex risk, which basically is another factor they are keeping on talking about. But if they could cap on the local market, they would definitely be able to at least get a boost in terms of local performance.
On that note, let's take a look at some of the other news that's made headlines over in Kenya at a time when the bond markets have been pretty active domestically. We've seen Prime Minister Raila Odinga saying that Kenya will now seek to borrow $10 billion next year in its first sale of euro bonds. What is the market made of this move? Because while global sentiment may be improving somewhat, it's still pretty uncertain given all that's unfolded in Dubai right now.
Well, thank you very much for that observation. Well, our market, especially over the last 1 year, has developed significantly in terms of the bond market. You've seen them going into the automatic trading system, as well as some of these other changes like the strengthening of the structure. And because of that, you're seeing a lot of foreign participants, especially IFC, who are thinking of offering a bond, Kenya shilling denominated. And also in terms of the government, they're also seeing it as a very, very, very good means of being able to finance some of their projects. And looking at the liquidity of our economy at the moment, it seems like we are having a case of flight to safety. And so most of the retail, as well as some of the institutional investors, are having a lot of appetite for some of these fixed return investments as opposed to equities, mainly because of the way the equity market has been eroded over the past. And so that definitely is boosting in terms of the confidence that they are having in terms of being able to raise the money. And even looking at it in terms of the ground, we are seeing the government of Kenya had issued an IFB last week, and it was even oversubscribed. So definitely there seems to be money which they're trying to rake in and be able to still redistribute the same in terms of some of the development expenditure.
Samuel, just very quickly, I mean, important to make a distinction here between a domestic interest in bonds and foreign interest. I mean, do you see this Euro bond receiving that much of a foreign investor interest?
Well, I had you mentioning something about credit rating. Well, definitely we would be waiting to be able to see how the bond will be rated, but definitely because of this aspect of being a government issue, it might be able to at least get a lot of security in terms of the interest from foreign participants. But definitely they would need to do a lot of lobbying, especially in terms of getting backing from some of these international institutions like the IFC or the World Bank, so that they can be able to at least get the assurance that they can be able to get demand for such a bond. But definitely it's a step in faith, which definitely we most of us will be looking out to see how it's going to turn out.